the man was all about mystery, and that, that was so important. And sometimes nowadays in magic, it's sort of being a bit sidelined, with all the stuff we see on TikTok and all the exposure and so on. It's, some of the mystery is being eroded, and it's a real shame, because Berglass was a legend, was unique in the sense that, there was no one will ever be like him again. And he once told me that for him, a deck of cards was the ultimate effect, that he could walk out on stage with a pack of cards in a box. He would throw it on the table and know that he had 20 minutes, half an hour of mind-blowing material. And what was even better about it, he didn't know where it would start and he didn't know where it would end. It's like the ultimate improv and the ultimate freedom. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just, to me, I have the hugest respect for comedians. They're the ultimate entertainer. They stand up with nothing except their words.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Desert Island Tricks. I am incredibly excited today because we have one of the guests that I've wanted to come onto the podcast since we put the podcast together. Now, if you don't know who this gentleman is, where on earth have you been? He is an absolutely phenomenal talent in our world, certainly in the world of not just magic, but I think most people will know him nowadays for his mentalism contributions. He is one of the rare performers or creators of whom I see a product or a lecture or an event and I will automatically purchase it, or I'll automatically try and get there and see it, because everything he puts together or puts out is guaranteed to be phenomenal. If you've not seen things like his Penguin lectures, if you've not seen some of the contributions that he actually puts on other people's products. So I've also noticed that he's very generous with his time and his thoughts with other people's products as well. So you always see him popping up and it's always just gold. Now, I've actually watched him growing up as well through Marvin's Magic and certain performances there. So, like I say, I am genuinely incredibly excited to have him on. I know it's going to be a really interesting list. And of course, we can all play Marc Paul Bingo. So, that is the name. We do have him here. It is the wonderful Marc Paul. Hello, Marc.
Hello, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me on. But I have to say, your intro has made me feel very old. That's the thing. With age comes a little bit of wisdom. So hopefully I've got something interesting to say to you.
Well, how long have you even been in magic? I mean, I'm not sure what age you started. I know it was fairly young, but it seems to have just been for forever.
I'm 56 now. I got interested when I was about 10 years old. So, that's 46 years. But I became a pro when I was 20. So, I've been working as a magician, for 35 plus years. So, and don't always think that I've been a mentalist. I used to do close-up. I used to sort of do sort of more stand-up sort of comedy magic. We're all influenced by Paul Daniels and Wayne Dobson. I think I sort of started out like that in my teens. So, but you sort of find your own way and your own feet. And I sort of gravitated towards the mentalism. So that's what most people know me for, because that's what I've been doing for about the last sort of 20 years or so.
Well, I think your contributions to mentalism, you seem to be one of the creators and performers who can really soak up and digest methods. And it seems to be you're someone who can reference things really quickly and really easily off the top of your head. And I've noticed, like I mentioned earlier, I've noticed that you pop up in a lot of other people's projects. I know I've seen you on Luch's membership platform before. and you seem to be really good at just coming out with those methods and saying, well, yeah, I think this belonged to this person, and then you take one or two of those methods and you put them together to create something so commercial, so well thought through. Just an example, your envelope tests are always so good. Every time I see one, they're so cleverly constructed.
Well, you're absolutely right when you say I'm sort of I'm well read. You know, I there was a period of my life in my sort of early 20s, and it probably lasted about 10 years. It probably lasted until I was 30, where I was immersed in magic. And when I say immersed, I mean I lived it and breathed it every day, every hour, every day. You know, Anthony Owen was, renting a room in my house. Danny Buckler was renting a room in my house. You know, we would be brainstorming, talking about magic, reading magic books, trying tricks out on each other, and of course going out and doing gigs as well. And I think that immersive period was so important in forming who I am today, because, you know, I read a lot. I still read a lot. And I think if you're a magician, I know DVDs are fantastic, and they are great, but I still love a good magic book, you know, to read and immerse yourself and let your own imagination play on those methods. And you're absolutely right. I mean, from a creative point of view, if people say, you know, where does your creativity come from? Well, I say it's other people. I mean, it comes from earlier ideas. And if there's any originality, it's the combining of those ideas together to form something new or take it in a different direction. So, if you're a young performer, I think, you know, don't be afraid to immerse yourself in it for a period of time. You know, be that geek, be the magic geek, because that was me.
And what point in your career did you transfer into the mentalism? Because, like I say, I remember seeing you doing Marvin's Magic, and then there seems to be this. It's almost like a period in time where you went from one thing straight into another. It feels like quite a direct transition. Is that the case, or was it a gradual thing over time?
It was quite quick from a time perspective, but there'd been a lot of preparation leading up to that period. I mean, what happened really is I looked in the mirror first of all. And I think it's important as a performer that you've got to do that. You look in the mirror and you have to be 100% honest with what you're seeing. Who are you? You know, what do you look like? You tall, you're short. You know, what's your hair like? You know, are you losing your hair? Are you spotty? Are you whatever it is? You've got to accept the truth of what you're seeing in the mirror. And when I looked in the mirror, the problem is I'm not a funny guy. Not really. I'm quite a sort of serious person, and I think that sort of came through from looking in the mirror, and I realized that I can't really be a Paul Daniels or be a Wayne Dobson and have that sort of cheeky chappy, I mean, nowadays I look at people like Tom Wright, you know, he's got that same sort of cheeky chappy, Michael J. Fitch, same thing. That's just not me. That's not my style. So I think it really came from realizing that. And I always wanted my magic to be amazing. I think a magician is about generating oohs and ahs, about generating and creating wonder. It's not about laughs, not for me. There are lots of other professions that can get laughs, lots of other entertainment professions. And I think it's sort of, we have something extra. We have that sense of wonder, which very few other branches of entertainment can invoke. So I wanted my magic to be really super strong. And I sort of just naturally gravitated towards the mentalism. It seemed to be the area that sort of worked for me. I remember reading a quote in the Jinx that Anaman said, where he said sort of mentalism is the grown-up form of magic, and sort of in a way he's right. You know, I cannot see myself tucking a red silk handkerchief into my hand and making it disappear as a 50-year-old man. That's not something I would do. What am I doing there? But the idea that I'm sort of maybe an expert in the mind, an expert in body language or whatever it is that I'm sort of is my sort of pseudo process, then that's something I feel I can sell. And I think it does need that slightly serious leaning to sort of make it believable, because if you put too much comedy in it, it becomes unbelievable. So I think what happened was I was doing a lot of close-up. I wanted to become a stage performer. I had done a lot of research in mentalism. I put a mentalism act together. I had performed it at places like Monday Night Magic, the Hen and Chickens. Richard McDougall had a place down at Battersea Art Centre, which was called Ever So Slightly, I think. And I had been trying out these mentalism routines, and they seemed to work. They seemed to fit me and work well. And so what happened was I was doing a lot of commercial close-up magic. I was doing a lot of close-up table hopping. And to be honest, I was sort of starting to burn out at that sort of stuff. It was sort of in the mid-90s, this was. And I wanted to, I'd seen John Lenihan at a gig where I was doing close-up work. I had to work for 3 hours. John Lenihan comes out and does 25 minutes and has earned 3 times the amount I've earned. So I'm like, or more. So I was like, I want to do that. I want to be that. And so in the space of a year, I literally became a mentalist. So it was quite a quick period of time. And the way I did it was to leverage the close-up gigs. So I would upsell a close-up gig and say, oh, by the way, for an extra X amount, I'll do a 10-minute bit at the end of something special, some mind reading at the end of, or at the coffee stage of the gig or something like that. And it really was quite a short process to get to that point where I was doing a sort of 40-minute cabaret rather than going out and doing the close-up.
Well, you've sort of given us something to bite onto there, and whether in a good way or not, because normally we play guest bingo. So today we're going to play Marc Paul bingo, and the idea is that we can start to think about what we think you would put in your list.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yes, okay.
Interestingly, you said that you cannot see yourself putting a red handkerchief into your hand. So that gives us maybe an idea of what you may not include, but then you threw us a little curveball by mentioning cabaret performances and close-up performances. And you also mentioned the transition into mentalism. So everyone playing at home, do we think the list is going to be purely mentalism? Do we think it's going to be a mixture of close-up mentalism and stage mentalism, if that's where you're going? Or do we think there's going to be a couple of curveballs in there? Because like you mentioned, your background is not just in mentalism. It really is a completely diverse pool of magic. So we could have a couple of little curveballs in there. It's going to be an interesting list, I think.
Or I might just be very straightforward and boring.
If this is your first time listening, the idea is that we're about to maroon Marc on his very own desert island. When he's there, he's allowed to take 8 tricks, banish 1 item, take 1 book, and 1 non-magic item that he uses for magic. Particulars like who's there, what's there, how many people are there, how big the island is, we do not mind. It's all in Marc's own imagination. We just care about the list because this is the ultimate list of tricks that he could not live without. So that being said, let's take that little journey over to your island, Marc, and find out what you put in position number 1.
Okay, well, what you're going to get here is a list that really is, it's all performance stuff. There are no pipe dreams here. This is all stuff that I have done, and I do regularly still. This is all part of my working set, is really what you're going to see here. So in position number 1 is the magic square. Now, I'm not a fan of the magic square, and I've been sort of quite vocal about that over the years. But the magic square is phenomenal. It is probably the best opening routine for a mentalist that I have ever found. And as we were discussing, I'm fairly well read. I do keep myself abreast of things as well. And I know there are other classic openers, like a tossed out deck or maybe a just chance routine or something like that. But the magic square for me, I think I've been opening my show, certainly on cruise ships. It's not something I do in corporate world, I must confess. I've tried it a few times in the corporate world, and it doesn't quite hit in the same way as it does on a cruise ship. And I think I'll sort of explain why I think that might be in a moment. So the thing is, although I'm not a fan of the magic square, what it does is it it's a lovely bridge. You're going from an unknown performer to someone who's going to be doing amazing impossibilities. So you're going to be reading minds essentially by the end of the performance. And what the Magic Square does, it's a lovely starting point because it's something believable. It is something achievable by everyone in the audience. I mean, at the end of the day, if they've got a formula, they understand that it's a formula. They understand that there is some sort of process involved that's going to generate the square. And by the way, if you don't know what a magic square is, it's basically a grid 4x4, and the audience call out a 2-digit number. I quickly put a number in every single box on the grid. So I write 16 numbers down and then immediately show, that's all done in under 30 seconds. And I immediately show that every row totals the number they called out, every column, every diagonal, the pan diagonals, those are the half diagonals, the groups of 4 in the corner, the groups of 4 in the middle, and each of the corners. Added all together is the number they've called out in every single direction. So it's a lightning calculation demonstration. And I love lightning calculation demonstrations. There's not many of them around. Not many performers do them. And I think it's that wonderful thing where you don't even have to worry about an audience that doesn't like numbers, because this is all about a mental process. It's showing that you can do something incredibly fast with your mind that most people cannot do. But it's a believable skill. People think that with practice, they could do that too. So that's really, that's the opener. That is number one.
I think it's very much an example of a magic routine that lives or dies on presentation over the method, so to speak. And the fact that you just mentioned that it gives credence to your skills as a performer, and then you followed that up with that's your opener, is that why it's in that position? So it almost warms the audience to the idea that you can do these things and what you're about to demonstrate is based on skill as opposed to trickery or illusion.
Absolutely, exactly that. I mean, you said, it warms the audience to these ideas. And that's exactly how I treat it. I treat it as a mental warm-up. It's me warming up before I go into the other sort of more difficult mental processes that I'm going to be exhibiting during the show. So it warms me up. Apparently, it warms the audience up. And then after that, I sort of segue into something that is an audience warm-up as well. But I think for me, you hit on a very, very important point, and that is presentation is everything with the Magic Square. For me, it's all about speed. The whole thing is done in about 3 minutes. The whole thing, that's the calling of the number out, it's generating the square, showing all the combinations of the square. And during those sort of showing of the combinations, I can sometimes get up to 6 rounds of applause or 6 reactions to what I'm doing. Sort of each new phase is a surprise to the general public. We as magicians, we sometimes look at an effect like the Magic Square and we sort of gloss over it because we sort of know what it is, we know what it achieves. The method is frankly quite uninteresting, and we forget the appeal it can have. So for me, it's about speed. It's about generating reaction. So I can, within 3 minutes, I can have the audience applauding, cheering, and have done so maybe 5 or 6 times. And I simply can't find another opening effect that can do that. Can you think of one? Or if anyone can think of one, let me know, because I really would like to know.
Well, there's a really interesting thing with mentalism, I would say in particular, in terms of a field of magic or a genre of magic, in which there is some sort of illogical, logical reveals. So, for example, the chair test is a reveal which you're going to get 4 or 5 reactions from the audience, which really you shouldn't get, because logically, if A happens, then B, C, D, E, F, however many reveals you've got are going to happen. Equally, a reveal at the end of the show. So you've done all this mentalism, and then there's an envelope with all those revelations in. Really, you shouldn't get a reaction there either. And this falls into that same bracket where really if A and B works, then obviously the whole thing's going to work. And I think that probably comes into the performance aspect of it. It must be how you're performing it which really elevates that moment and makes the audience come with you on that little journey.
Well, I'm so glad you sort of raised that point, because, again, I think you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head with this. I think there are various discussions in magic. I do remember having a discussion with Michael Weber about the prediction magic square. So this is the idea that you do a magic square, and Jeffrey Durham does a great version of this. So in Jeffrey's version, this is where he generates the magic square, and then at the end, he turns it around, and on the back of the board is an envelope. And you open up the envelope, and you take out a large piece of paper that you unfold, and you've predicted the 2-digit number that the audience was going to call out. Now, when you speak to someone like Michael Weber, who's such an intellectual thinker about magic, and it's about themes and thematics, he's saying this is totally illogical. And he's absolutely right. It would be illogical to generate a magic square with a random number and then show that you've predicted it, because it undermines what the magic square is. You already knew, if you already knew the numbers, you could have sat there and spent 3 hours working out a magic square. It doesn't make sense. But there is a very, very, very important point, and that is it's about the audience. And David Berglass recognized this. We're going to talk about Berglass a number of times through this. Berglass could do a reveal and then do, for example, his newspaper test. He would reveal a piece of information. He would, be the word that was chosen in the newspaper. He would open up a prediction, which was in an envelope, and there was the word predicted. But then he would show that, he would have an argument that, maybe you think I switched it or something. So here's a folder, and in here is a copy of the newspaper, but there's only one page in here, and circled on the page is the word. Now, that's essentially the same reveal, but it's not to the audience. It seems to escalate. And then at the end of the performance, Berglass takes his jacket off, and as he's walking off stage, you see that on the back of his shirt is the word. Now, he's basically predicted the same thing 3 times, and that thematically should not work. But it does. There is a sense of escalation, and sense of escalation is so important in mentalism. We are essentially doing the same thing. You think of something, I tell you what it is. You think of something else, and I tell you what it is. Now, but from the general public's point of view, if you think of a number between 1 and 10, and I tell you what it is, hey, that's pretty good. If I tell you the word you're thinking of from a dictionary, that's really impressive. That's really impressive. But if I tell you the first person you kissed when you were 12 years old at school, that's incredible. Same 3 effects. We've just read minds. That's all we've done. But there is a sense of escalation in the general public's mind. And that's what a good mentalism act does. I love revealing personal information, but I'm not going to be revealing that too early on in the show. I'm going to be saving that to the end of the show, because I know in the minds of the general public, it is much more impactful than telling them a word they're thinking of out of hundreds of thousands of words from a book. It's just, and the reality is probably there are only 50 or so men's names that come up all the time, but the audience is not thinking like that. There is really genuinely a sense of escalation, and that's what the magic square does. There is this sense of escalation behind it.
Well, I think that's a great opening gambit. And you've also teased something there, which is we're going to be hearing someone's name throughout the podcast. So that leads us into number 2. So what did you put in your second position?
Okay, well, interesting. You, in the last example, you brought up the idea of something like a chair test. And I love chair tests. And David Berglass had a great chair test. And I've gone through many different versions of chair tests over the years. And what I'm going to describe to you now is an original effect with me. This is something I haven't released yet. It's something that's in my show almost all the time. Some people maybe have seen me perform it because I've performed it recently at Blackpool. And it may be something I release in the future. But it is a chair test which involves 3 people in the audience, but they never come up on stage. And for me, this was a revelation. I was forced to create it. What happened was during COVID, during lockdown, we were very quickly told that as soon as the cruise ships start back up again, yes, we can start work, but no spectator can come up on stage. You're not allowed to have any transfer of any item. So you couldn't get someone to pick a card. You couldn't hand someone a paper and a pen. That would not be allowed. Now, this is quite interesting because now that actually eliminates 98% of all methods that mentalists are using. So I really had to create 2 brand new 45-minute shows of mind reading when no one comes up on stage. And that's what I did during COVID, during lockdown. That was my task. Each day I worked on that problem. What do I do? How do I solve this problem? And it's a tough one to solve. But I was very pleased. I did solve it. And I did have 2 45-minute shows. No one comes up on stage, no transfer of items between people. You can guess the magic square was part of it. It was still my opening routine. It was already in there. And what I ended up doing was sort of hiring our village hall and going down there, pretty much 2 or 3 times a week, blocking everything through. And then when the cruise ship started up, I literally went out to my first cruise ship and did a show, 2 shows that I've never done before, ever in my life, So it was quite a challenge. But what came out of it was some fantastic concepts and idea. And that's what I'm going to describe to you now. This is the chair test when no one comes up on stage. So basically it's 4 envelopes that are displayed on music stands on the stage. You don't have to do that, but I do it because it sort of fills the stage a bit. They're sort of fairly large envelopes, the version that I use. So, and there are 3 people that have been selected using an interesting selection process. I won't go into what that is now, but I always do things. I don't just pick people. I don't say, oh, lady there, the gentleman there, oh, you, sir, as well. I do some sort of criteria. I get them doing something. A simple example would be I could get them all to think of a simple geometric shape, 2 simple geometric shapes, one inside of the other. Okay, hands up those who's thinking of a circle and a triangle, stand up. In other words, there's something interesting they're doing that makes them selected. All right, so there are 3 people that I've ended up selecting, and I do a routine that is a sort of influence routine. It's framed as just chance. In other words, I'm going to offer them $100 to win. If they pick the winning envelope, there's a winning message inside one of these 4 envelopes. If you pick the winning message, I'm going to give you $100. But I don't want to give you $100. This is my hard-earned cash. I don't want to give it away. So I'm going to actually try to influence you. I'm going to try to just use words, language, to prevent you from picking the correct envelope. Is that okay with you? Now, what I've addressed here is the classic sort of problem that people have with just chance. It seems like a bit of a mean routine. Well, I've sort of embraced that. It is a mean routine, and the reason it's mean is because I don't want to give you my $100. And I'm sort of saying that as quite fun and it's tongue in cheek. Everyone knows it's just a game. So basically, the first man, we go through some sort of influencing process, the sort of pseudo influencing process, but that's sort of quite a fun thing, things like, the envelopes are numbered, it really is for you to choose which one of these envelopes, it's that type of sort of fun influencing thing. And then the first man picks an envelope and I open it up, and inside, it's not the winning message, but there is a message folded up on an A4 paper, and it says the first man will pick this envelope. Now, that gets a great reaction because there's a prediction and a reveal all in one. So that gets a round of applause. A lot of just chance routines, you end up with just getting the applause at the end. So here is, you've got impact. You've got a reveal straight away. And the next person is a lady. She makes a choice. She picks her envelope. I open it up. I take out the sheets of paper that's inside, unfold it. And it says, a lady, let's say she picked number 3. It says a lady will choose number 3. And she's the only lady in the group. So of the 3 people, there are 2 men and 1 lady. And then the final guy, he's got 2 envelopes. He's got a 50-50 chance. He announces his choice. I give him a chance to swap to the other envelope or not swap to the other envelope. It's up to him. And there's some sort of comedy lines that go with that, which play very well. And then eventually he chooses an envelope. Let's say he had chosen an envelope and at the last minute he swaps to the other envelope. Well, then I open his original choice and it's the winner. He's lost. In other words, if he'd stuck with the original choice, he would have won. And then finally, we opened the envelope that he did choose, and it says, a man with glasses wishes he hadn't swapped. So you've got this kicker of predicting not only what he looks like, but what his action was at the end. Now, what I like about this routine is it gives you applause through the routine. It eliminates the anticlimax of the winning message. I always thought that just chance is a little bit of an anticlimax. So we get the sort of anticlimax out of the way. It's in the 3rd position before we go into the final reveal. And the final reveal is predicting that he would choose this envelope ultimately, a man with glasses, and that he either wishes he'd swapped or hadn't swapped, depending on the outcome. So it's sort of just chance. It's sort of a chair routine. It's predicting what these people are and their actions and what they do. And no one comes up on stage. And it plays for about 10 minutes. And for me, this has become a must-have routine in every show, really, because it creates great audience involvement. And if you think now, we've done the Magic Square, we've done this. We're probably about 15 minutes into the show, 15 minutes into a mind-reading show. And no one has come up on stage at this point.
Yeah, I think that sounds so good. And what I particularly like there is the way that you've swapped the narrative at the end of that to create sort of an extra moment. And I think a lot about reveals in mentalism, which sounds really niche. I'm sorry, guys.
No, we should. I mean, the reality is it's all about reveals. The more... I'll do a little quick plug now. There's a friend of mine, a Polish mentalist called Radek Hoffman, and Radek is a great advocate of revelations, and he's just written a book that is called Revelations, and it's all about the different reveals. It's all about the different ways of revealing information. He's not a fan of pad of paper and a pen. He wants to create different ways of doing it. So it's all about the reveals.
Yeah, and I mean, number one, I'll be picking up that book. I'll be ordering that straight away, so thank you. And the second point is, I've noticed that a lot in your work with the narrative that you follow. It tends to, most performances tend to sort of peak midway and then sort of plateau at the end. But yours always sort of go up and down. And just before that sort of big reveal, there's an immediate big reveal before that one. So it's almost like you try and go for big reveal, they think that that's the end, and then bang, you hit them with this second big reveal.
Yes, I think you don't want to overuse it in an act, but I think this is really important. The other thing I'm a huge fan of is callbacks as well. So a callback is where something has happened earlier on in your act, and later in the act you reference what happened earlier on. So maybe a mistake happened earlier in the act, and then later on something happens that rectifies the mistake that happened earlier. And I think these sort of theatrical devices make your show just feel more organic, more in the moment. I think that's important. I mean, you talk about, I know some people sort of don't like kickers, or have an argument against having sort of a kicker climax or a multiple climax. And I would argue that, I'm in the business of generating reaction. So if I can do something, and this is Berglass. Berglass, he's done the reveal, and then he tags on 2 more reveals that get reaction again. So instead of just getting that 1 round of applause, he's getting 3 rounds of applause. Well, anything I can do that is going to add rounds of applause or reaction to my performance, then I'm going to try and integrate that if I can. So far, we've used a piece of paper. That could be on an easel on a stage, but it could be a piece of paper on a pad in a parlor situation, or even in close-up. And then the 4 envelope routine, the audience chair test, as you describe it, is just 4 envelopes. That's all it is. Now, the ones I use are big, but it could be done in a small version that you are carrying in your jacket pocket. So this would be something you could do, in a smaller sort of maybe a private party in a house or something like that. The second routine probably wouldn't be something I would do round tables, and neither would be the magic square, because I think you need the attention span. And actually, I didn't answer this. Earlier on, I said why the magic square didn't work in a corporate situation. And I think it does require the audience to pay attention. On a cruise ship, they're coming just to watch you that evening. There's no other entertainment. They're all coming to see you. And I think the problem is at the end of a corporate gig, where there's been a lot of alcohol floating around, magic square is a mistake. You don't want to be doing that where the audience have to think, So I think, that's the answer to that.
Well, it makes me excited to see where we're going to go with number 3. So what did you put in your 3rd spot?
All right. Number 3 is a routine that I have been doing probably the longest of all of my routines. It is always with me. It is always in a set. If I'm doing it in the corporate world, if I'm doing cruise ships, if I'm working for magicians, wherever I am, I will always do this. I've used it. I've used it as a middling routine. That's where it normally is. But I've also used it as an opener in corporate situations. And for me, it is worth its weight in gold. Although its weight is not much, because all it is 2 envelopes and a business card. So this 2 envelopes and a business card gives me 10 to 12 minutes of solid entertainment, fun, and gives me a mind-blowing, clean revelation at the end. So what I'm talking about is it's basically its history goes back to Bob Cassidy. Bob Cassidy published a routine called the Medium's Envelope, and from that he developed an effect called White Dwarf. And this is really my version of White Dwarf. Interesting, Radek Hoffman has a new version of it that he's called Red Dwarf. So you could have a look at that as well. His is a sort of under test conditions way of performing it. And the way I do it is I know with just those couple of envelopes and a business card in my pocket and a marker pen, I just have utter confidence. It takes up no room. It does not affect the cut of my suit. By the way, I always like to have my suit done up. When I'm on stage, I think it presents a better figure. It presents a better image if your jacket is done up. The only problem with that is if you've got things in your pockets, they bulge and stick out, and that affects the line of your suit. So I really don't want things in my pockets, and I generally don't have a lot of material in my pockets if I can help it. But the beauty of this particular envelope test is that it's just 2 envelopes. One is bigger than the other, so one is inside the other, and it's a business card. It's completely flat. You just can't see it when it's in your inside breast pocket. So what is the effect? Well, the effect is, for me, the conversion of a skeptic into a believer. So this is all about having fun with the audience. I'm asking the audience, hands up, those who believe in genuine psychic phenomena, this sort of thing. And it's not, although I'm a serious performer, it's not done seriously. It's still tongue in cheek. It's fun along the way. And basically, I isolate a person who is a skeptic, a non-believer. And I have a way of, I get him to stand up and everyone looks at him because I want everyone to see what a skeptic looks like. This is, we're making a thing of it. And I get him up on stage. So this is the first time someone's coming up on stage. And we talk about why he's a skeptic, which can be quite fun as well. And I trick him into sort of saying some things, and then I can sort of undermine what he's just said, which is quite fun. And again, it's difficult to describe this without it sounding, it's not mean or anything like that. It is just lighthearted. It's just fun. And I even say to him as he's coming up, I say, I'm a skeptic too, so that makes two of us. So he knows we're on the same side. And we do a test conditions piece of mentalism. He's going to think of any word he likes in the English language. I tend to get him to think of maybe something 4 or 5 letters long. And he writes it down on a business card and he seals it inside the 2 envelopes. So it's sort of test conditions. And then he stands on the 2 envelopes and I read his mind. I tell him piece by piece exactly what word he's thinking of. Now, this is the first piece of mind reading in the show. We've done a sort of demonstration of lightning calculation. We've done a demonstration of being able to influence people, which of 4 envelopes they're going to choose. And now we're going into the first piece of mind reading. And that's why I love using a skeptic, because we are going to read his mind. We're going to tell him exactly what he's thinking. It proves the point. It proves the point exactly. There's also something that happens during this that has been a staple of my act ever since I really discovered it. And that is I teach the audience how I want them to react. So as I'm forming the routine, the guy's thinking of a word. And let's say, I've already read his mind. I know what the word is, but I'm going to reveal it as dramatically as possible. So I will go along the line of, I would reveal the first letter, for example. All right. And I've shown the audience what the first letter is. I get him to announce what the first letter is. And normally there is a spattering of applause. And the reason there's a spattering of applause is because actually the audience is quite impressed by what they've just seen. And they sort of sometimes forget to react to it. So I push on that. I say, look, judging from your reaction, I was expecting, more. I work on American cruise ships. I'm expecting an American reaction. And I sort of teach the audience to cheer and whoop and shout when I do something. And so by the end of this routine, when we reveal the word, the audience is cheering and whooping and shouting. And I get the guy at the end to raise his hands and shout at the top of his voice, I'm a believer, that type of thing. So it's fun, it's engaging. It is a really strong piece of mentalism, but more importantly, it teaches them how I want them to react. And I use a callback to call back to that later on in the show. When we get to the climax of the show, I call back to that to reinforce that reaction. So we're guaranteed to get a strong reaction at the end of the show. So for me, that is a must-have. I just don't go anywhere without that routine. And as I said, I've used it as an opener. I've used it in a short spot. If I'm doing a spot, just one item as part of a longer show, maybe it's a farewell show, and I'm just doing me just doing 10 minutes. That would be the routine that I would do. And for me, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in your Penguin lecture, and I think you called it Challenge Mind Reading. Now, my question is, and I don't want to give anything away about what's coming up, but you mentioned that you have them write a word down, and this is one of those methods which would allow you to reveal anything,
yes,
essentially. So is there a reason that you don't go for a personal piece of information like a past love and stuff like that? Is that something that's going to come later, so you're building your reveals up to that?
That's exactly it. It's what we mentioned earlier. It's this sense of escalation. So he's thinking of, and it's not any word. I put restrictions on it. I actually say, I want you to think of a word in the English language. We'll make it a simple word, 4 letters, 5 letters long, something like that. A word that everyone's going to recognize. Now, this is 2 things. First of all, I don't want to fail at this point. I don't want someone to write something down and I don't know what it is. Some long-winded, technical term that I'm not familiar with. That's no good. So actually restricting it to just 4 or 5 letters, making it a simple word, for me, that's great. And it's still impressive. This is, and I also say things along the lines of, sometimes, when people are standing where you are, they're influenced by what they're seeing. So they write down a word like lights or chairs or people or stage. So don't write anything down like that, because that's come from experience. The number of times I've been on a cruise ship and somebody wrote down ship. Well, that's not very appealing. What I want them to write down is a word, that's like, write down the word apple, or write down something like, banana, or anything that's just a regular. Bananas would be too long, but a simple word. A lot of people write down things that they've seen during the day. They write down church, or they might write down things like pizza, or they might write down things that have been maybe in the port. So there's still an element of believability and the process that's going on here. We didn't talk much about the process, but this is a 10-minute routine. I mean, if you get someone to write a word down and seal it inside 2 envelopes, that is done in a minute? This is a 10-minute routine. So it's all about the reveal and the conditions of the reveal. And because I've built it up, And let's address something here, because I know a lot of magicians worry about getting someone to write something down. If you're a mind reader, why are they writing it down? This is how the argument goes. All of that is covered in this routine. I say you're a skeptic, so I'm going to get you to write it down for 2 reasons. The first reason, physically writing it impresses upon your mind. It becomes a stronger thought in your head. The act of writing it implants it in your mind much more firmly than just thinking about it. And secondly, you are a skeptic, so you cannot change your mind. So this is all done. It makes sense that that's why he's writing it down. And it's a very clean routine. It's, there is the actual method, as I'm sure you're aware, there is a second or 2, and the method's all over.
Yeah, I think it's such a lovely routine. And what I'm enjoying about this episode so far, and regular listeners will remember Bill Abbott's episode where I said it almost felt like we were watching his show. Even though this is a podcast, it really felt like we were going through his entire show and watching that. That's what I feel like here. I almost feel like I'm in the audience watching your show, understanding the process and how you've gone about everything. So I'm really excited to see where this is going to go. So what did you put in your 4th spot?
So my 4th spot, we come to David Berglass. So with David Berglass, I have been a lifelong, massive fan of David. He was my magical dad, my mentor, inspiration. And I've always loved his material. I've always loved his style. We haven't seen eye to eye on some of the sort of effects that I've sort of described to him over the years. He would do it one way, I might do it somewhere else, and that was fine. It was like, David Berglass would do it like that, but Marc Paul might do it like this, and he sort of understood that. I think he sort of respected that. But what I did is I took escalation. This is a classic David Berglass routine. It's in the Mind, Myth, and Magic of David Berglass. He also put it out earlier as a set of lecture notes. So, those are sometimes floating around on the internet if you see them. But escalation, so that's ESP-cology. So it's like escapology, but it's not. It's ESP-cology. And he came up with that title because he's got so many outs in the routine, is his sort of argument with it. Now, I used to love watching Berglass, and this was one of my favorite routines. It's a full-on, fill the stage, 6 people up on stage, loads of things happen, multiple reveals, multi-phase routine, and strong. But there were elements of it that certainly did not suit me. So what happened was that I started with the original Berglass routine, and over the years, things happened to it. It got, for example, straight away, pretty much third or fourth performance, it got cut down from 6 people on stage to 5 people on stage. When I say 5 people, there's a lineup of 6 people plus a woman at the side, and in my version, it's a lineup of 5 people plus a woman at the side. So when I say 5, it's the sort of lineup that I'm talking of. And what happens in this routine is it's all about making choices. It's all about decisions and how we make decisions, and how the media and corporations can affect how you make decisions. So this has a great hook. This is, it is a very good hook. And there is something in this routine that is exquisitely David Berglass's that I will never remove. It will never, ever be removed because it's so intrinsic to the routine. And what it is David Berglass's method for getting 5 or 6 people up on stage. I mean, this really is worth its weight in gold to any sort of working performer, because this can be a problem. If you approach that first person, to get them up on stage, if they say no, you're dead in the water. I mean, this can be really quite tough. And the way he does it is this, and I do exactly the same thing every single show, and this has never failed, ever. So the way it works is this. You tell the audience what you're about to do. So you say, in a moment, I'm going to ask 5 people, 5 men, to make the decision to come and join me on stage. All right, so not just yet, but in a moment. So you've already pre-warned them. The second stage of doing it is you compliment the 5 men. You say, these 5 men are very good at making decisions. They're the type of men that generally maybe have owned their own business. They've certainly been in charge of other people. They know their own mind. They're not easily influenced by the media or the television or what they hear on the radio. They make their own decisions about stuff. They generally don't do as their wives telling them, because, and you know who you are because your wife is digging you in the ribs now. So you've given a little compliment, a little boost. These are important men that are in charge of people, have their own businesses. And then the third stage is a clear call to action. So for me, it's a clap. And now I want my 5 gentlemen to come and join me on stage. And what you have, you see, because that process has gone through over the course of, say, a minute or so, you've pre-warned them, you've complimented them. The men that do come up, they want to be seen. They're important men. They're quite happy to be on display. And that has never failed. It is a beautiful way of getting people up on stage. There is one slight disadvantage. You are not choosing the people. They are self-selecting. So it is possible that, if you've got someone who's maybe a little bit tipsy and thinks, yeah, I'll go up, you could end up with someone like that. But generally what happens is you have more people coming up than you actually require. So if any of them are looking a little bit dodgy on the way, you can eliminate them and take someone else instead. But this doesn't require you to leave the stage, and it fits in beautifully with the routine because it's all about making decisions. So, I'm not going to pick you. I'm going to ask you to make the decision to join me. So for me, that is totally David Berglass. and it's just genius. I've never seen anyone else use it, and I think it is the only way to get a large group of people up on stage. So you've got these 5 men up on stage. As soon as they come up, they make another decision. They decide where they're going to stand on the stage. There are numbered cards and numbered positions. They stand wherever they like. There are some envelopes that get shuffled up, and they get dished out to the 5 men. And then a lady comes up. She's given some coloured cards. She mixes those up as well, and she's going to make 2 decisions. One is going to be a conscious decision. One is going to be a subconscious decision. So she chooses a man. And there's some lovely Berglass lines that come out of that. I say things like, don't worry, it's not for life. You don't even have to take him back to your cabin. I mean, that is straight from Berglass. Berglass, it's written up in the books, and those are the lines he used, and I use them and think of him every time I do. And they're funny lines, they're just lovely. And basically, it's a series of coincidences. She chooses a color. She chooses a man. The color she's chosen, when the guy opens his envelope, it matches the color of card that's in his envelope. And then I talk about my daughter and what her favorite color is. And can the lady find my daughter's favorite color? I've put a big X on my daughter's favorite colored card. And she picks another man. We open that envelope and it's got a big X on it. So she's found my daughter's favorite colored card. She's been mixing the cards. We've been mixing the men. And eventually they all take their cards out. And the card she has is in the same order color-wise as the men. She's dismissed and goes back. That's a huge round of applause, great reaction. But before the men go back, they pick up their numbered cards, and the number cards all also match where they've stood as well. So multi-phases, multiple predictions. And it departs from the original Berglass version in a very crucial way. I simply always thought that the revelation of Berglass ends with a sort of downbeat moment. He sort of sits on the stage and says, so how did I know all of this was going to happen? Well, I sat down in my dressing room and I thought, she's going to pick position number 3 and she's going to pick the color green. And he takes out one final envelope, opens that up, and it shows position 3 and green. So but for me, it was like a sort of a downbeat reveal. I wanted that upbeat of the end, so I just simply finish it. And what I've done is I've moved a reveal in the X on the card. That's something Berglass didn't do. So it's a routine. It's a second choice in there. That's a 1 in 5 choice, but she amazingly gets it right again before you go into the 5, matching the 5. But for me, that's an audience filler. It's lots of audience participation. Sorry, a stage filler. Lots of audience participation. It's a 12-minute routine, and it's in most of my shows. Not every show. It's now in my second show on cruise ships. But it was something that used to be in my number 1 show all the time, and. Just a lot of audience participation and fun. And just to point out, although I'm describing my act, what we've actually done here is we've meshed 2 acts together slightly. So, for example, I actually won't be doing escalation and let's say the audience chair test in the same show, not generally speaking. Sometimes I might, but generally they're sort of quite similar effects. They feel very different, but in essence, it's their prediction effects. They're predicting where people are standing and what people are doing.
I think it's really interesting as well, thinking about... you just mentioned that you may not do these in tandem in this specific order, in this specific show. But that routine is designed to sort of get people comfortable coming onto stage. And I think that's so clever. But it's also the idea that you've put that 4 tricks in, or several routines in. So it's almost like they've gotten used to you and your persona and how you are on stage, and that you're professional, that you can control the situation, that they feel comfortable with you as a performer. And only then are you allowing them to come onto the stage when they know that they can be comfortable with you in that situation.
Yeah, this wouldn't work as an opening routine at all. That sort of Berglass strategy if you try to use that like 30 seconds after you've walked out, that's not going to work. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I've already established myself. I've established my persona. There's nothing threatening. And it is just fun. We have a bit of fun along the way. It's not, there's nothing embarrassing that's going to happen, as it were. So, and they've already seen that from the previous routines. Yes, there's been a bit of fun, but nothing that people would not want to join in on.
Well, I think that's another really great choice, and there's videos of that online, and I believe you've taught that in one of your lectures as well.
Yeah, it's in the same Penguin. It's in the Penguin Live Act, which is on the. It's got the skeptic word test as well, the challenge mind reading routine, where I turn the skeptic into a believer.
Yeah, and I really urge people to go and check both of your Penguin Lives out, because they're both just phenomenal. And of course your academy as well, which I still think it's our best selling academy.
I can't believe how long that was. I mean, it's like 9 hours of material. I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, no wonder I haven't got anything left to talk about.
I think it's interesting though that I'm sure I'm not the only one in this, but I've digested that from end to end several times through, because it was just such a masterclass. I mean, specifically the Billet section was just one of the best. And of course, we've had other Billet courses come out with other people now, but I still think that is the best resource for a modern approach to billet work. I think it's just a phenomenal resource, and everyone should check it out.
I absolutely adore billets. I've always loved them. I have nothing against some of these modern, let's say. I don't want to use the sort of E word, but the type of thing I'm talking about, those sort of modern ways of achieving these sort of effects. I have nothing against those sort of methods. They're perfectly legitimate and fine. I just feel I'm cheating when I use them. I actually like the sort of rawness of having just 3 bits of paper and 3 pencils in your pocket and being able to deliver mind reading that's impactful and incredible at the same time. So it's just personal preference, but I'm old school. If you give me a choice, I would rather go with the nuts and bolts, bits of paper, pencils method.
But that does bring us to number 5. So what did you put in your 5th spot?
Well, you must be a mind reader, because it is a billet routine. This is again something that I have. Now I'm trying to think if it's published or not. I'm trying to think. I think it might. I'm sure it's on the Alakazam Academy. Because it's sort of fairly standard. There's nothing sort of uniquely me in it. But this was and still is a closer for me sometimes. Sometimes it can be thrown into the middle of a show. It can be part of a small set. So, for example, if I'm doing 20 minutes, I would do the sort of skeptic converting routine, and then I would do this 2 billet routine. And if anyone saw me perform at the Magic Circle Christmas show, not this year but last year, I think, or a couple of years ago, that was my set. It was a 25-minute set, which was a couple of envelopes in my pockets and 2 folded index cards in my jacket pocket. And that was 25 minutes. Because what this is, 2 billet test. Huge fan of this. It started as Bob Cassidy's name and place, but the method changed. I really didn't sort of like the method that Cassidy originally had. It felt a bit clunky. It also required you, in his original routine, to burn a billet, to burn a folded piece of paper. And that wasn't really something we would be doing on a cruise ship or something like that. So again, it wasn't ever sort of something that was ever considered. So I immediately changed the method and substituted another method that I knew, that would achieve essentially the same result. And what I had inadvertently done, I had recreated Bruce Bernstein's original routine that Bob Cassidy based Name and Place on. So I'd sort of solved a problem and at the same time actually reinvented, Bernstein's routine. Essentially what this does is it's two billets. They write down two pieces of information. We're getting on late in the show, so we're probably going to get time to do one of these. So one of these pieces of information is torn up and got rid of. And we're left with the one that I've never touched, that the spectator's been holding the whole time. And that's the one we're going to work with. And that's what we do work with. We work with that folded piece of card and we find out who it belongs to. We reveal the information that the person is thinking of and it's confirmed and it's all checked and that is correct. However, the other person is a little bit disappointed. So very quickly, I quickly read the mind of the second person as well. Now, for me, that's what that routine's all about. And this came from a discussion with Andy Nyman, again, 30 years ago. Now, for those that are listening, this obviously, we're tearing up an index card, so you probably have a good idea about what that is. If you want a clue, the initials C and T should give it to you. And the problem is why are you tearing it up? What's the justification? I mean, a lot of times, there isn't a justification. We just sort of tear it up and burn it. They've written something down and you tear it up and then you burn it or something along those lines. And it was Andy that suggested to me that this is a time thing, that there is some sort of time constraint going on. And I have to say, ever since he mentioned that to me, that clicked. It absolutely clicked with me. And I've been doing it that way ever since. And as I said, that's like 25 years ago or whatever. And it's perfect because I'm sort of, especially if it's a closing routine. And this probably would be my closing routine if I was doing a corporate set. It's a shorter corporate set. I would probably close with this because I will be dealing with two pieces of personal information. If I'm using it in the middle of the show, it's not personal information. We might be doing, it might be personal information, but something like a PIN number, for example. So it's personal information, but it's not, it's numbers. So it's personal, but impersonal at the same time. Whereas if it's someone's name, that is personal and personal. It's like, you see what I mean? Does that make sense? Personal and personal. I think you understand what I'm saying. So it's a very flexible routine. And for me, this is just two index cards in my pocket with two pens, two pencils, whatever. And again, it's 10 minutes. And with that justification, it makes it almost test conditions, because what happens is look, I'm really sorry, we're running out of time. Look, I'm going to get rid of one of them. I just tear it. Which one do you want me to get rid of? Great, I'll get rid of it. It's gone. The one you're holding on to, I've never touched it, and I won't touch it. I'm going to come near it, but I won't touch it. And let's see if we can find out who it belongs to. And you go into the reveals. And then what you have is this lovely encore moment where suddenly it's like, you're really disappointed. We've got maybe a minute left on the show. I'm going to very quickly try and do you as well. And you quickly, and it ramps up as well. The speed ramps up. So the first reveal is more slow. It's not as long a reveal as, say, the challenge mind reading with the skeptic. It's done as a it's quicker than that. But the second reveal is super fast. It literally is, they're thinking about, all right, concentrate on this, blah, 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 and bam. And it's at that point, just before I reveal it, that I do the callback. I'll say, if I've written down this, Sarah's name from when, I've written down the Sarah's first crush when she was 10 years old, would that be amazing? Would it be so amazing that you would stand, cheer, and shout like Americans? So this is the callback to the skeptic word test. And what that enables, I've added one word. I've added stand into that as well. I've used this phrase of, will you all cheer, shout, whoop like Americans? But at the end, I add in, will you all stand, cheer, whoop, shout like Americans? And what it does is it tries to instigate a standing ovation. I'm essentially asking for it, but I don't have a problem with that at all. Because what I'm just doing is utterly impossible. There is no Billet at this point. This is gone. This went ages ago. It went 10 minutes ago. She's in the middle of the audience. She doesn't come up on stage. I quickly just think about this name. I'll try and get it from you. And I reveal this highly personal piece of information with her in the middle of the audience. It's impossible. And she will react because, there's no, PS work, if you know what I'm talking about there. I mean, there's nothing, it's all just done in the moment, and it seems spontaneous, and it seems like spontaneous mind reading happening at distance with somebody on the middle of the room. So it is utterly impossible. So again, that sense of escalation is there. And so actually, you do get a standing ovation, or you can get a standing ovation off the back of it. I won't say that I get it every single time, but I get it probably most of the time. And that's what I'm sort of trying to do. That's what I'm there to do, to sort of create that reaction. So for me, the 2 envelopes that I keep in my breast pocket and the 2 folded index cards that I keep in my side pockets, that is the core of every act that I do. That's 20 to 25 minutes of strong, impactful mentalism with nothing but some bits of paper.
I think on the podcast we spoke before about this idea of like your mental toolbox. So you may have a magic case full of incredible props that allow you to do this, that, and the other. But if that was to be lost and gone tomorrow, which hopefully doesn't happen to anyone, but if it was gone, then what do you have in your mental toolbox which will see you through a gig or, getting work?
Those core routines. I mean, you see Magic Square, that's knowledge. I mean, I have memorized a Magic Square. I know a Magic Square, so I can reel it off super quick. And just recently, I did see on the internet, somebody was advertising a gizmo, all right, that will do that all for you and send the information to you in a special way. And you know what? I'm like, really? Why not just memorize a Magic Square? And then you have that knowledge for life. You can generate a Magic Square anytime, any place. And for me, I have collected a whole host of routines that require nothing. No props, they're knowledge. And Magic Square is one of them. My other routine that I do all the time, summing up. That is, and summing up is not on this list, okay, interestingly enough. It could have been, but it's not on this list. Summing up is a very flexible routine, number routine, where you sort of have a prediction ending. You've predicted the numbers, and then it has a kicker because the numbers mean something in some form or other. That's just knowledge. I mean, I don't even need there's a little website that will generate the numbers for you, but I don't need to do that. I do it normally mentally myself because I enjoy sort of creating the matrix. So I do that. That's just knowledge. I have a routine which is called the human equation, which involves 9 people getting up on stage, and they're all numbered. They're just given a number verbally, and they mix themselves up into a different order, and I predict the total of the numbers that get chosen. So those 3 routines, they're all routines that can be done with nothing, with they are just knowledge in your head. Now, the 2 core routines we've talked about here, the skeptic, the challenge skeptic test, and the 2 Billet routine, well, they require just some business cards and envelopes or index cards, so I could even, find those bits of card or, go down to reception, borrow a couple of business cards, and we're off.
Yeah, I think that the whole set so far, really, you could land in another country, go to a local stationer's, and you could build an entire act
But is there a stationers on this desert island? That's the thing.
Well, it depends which one. We can have a Staples for our American friends and maybe a Ryman's for our UK friends. There you go. But it does lead us on to number 6. So what was in your 6th spot?
Okay, I've put in, this probably where I would have put Summing Up, but Summing Up sort of become, it's not even mine anymore. It's like everyone does it. It's like it's out there. It's like just this morning I had someone text me saying, I've lost the link to the website. Can you give it to me? And I do it all the time. I've got a gig this afternoon. I need to generate the numbers. So in number 6 position is a card memory demonstration. So this is memorizing cards from a shuffled deck of cards. And this has become my sort of opener for my second show. And that's where Summing Up would normally go as the opener in the second show. But Summing Up has sort of moved to the side at the moment. I will probably come back to it. I will probably do more with it. It's just I have other number routines in my show at the moment. So I've done Summing Up for years. There is also something else that facilitated this, and that is that flip charts are becoming less and less available on cruise ships. They're sort of moving to smart screens and things like that. So the flip chart that I would normally use to do Summing Up on stage sometimes isn't readily available, and that's one of the reasons why it's sort of sidelined. So we've got 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a card memory demonstration. And I love this. I love memorizing a deck of cards. I think it fits into that category. Once again, this has become the opener. So if you think my second set, this is the opener. This is displaying a skill that is believable and achievable with the right practice. That's what I like in a good opening routine. I don't want to jump feet first in with the mind reading. I want to do a display of mental prowess. And I've done that with the lightning calculation in show 1 with the magic square. And that's what I do here with this card memory demonstration. And I only memorized 13 cards. I memorized quarter of the deck. So it's quite a fast demonstration. Its methodology comes primarily from Ross Johnson. Ross, it's the same routine that Ross Johnson does, which is published on his Penguin live act. But the problem is he does it as a mind reading demonstration. So not a problem, but I didn't want it as a mind reading demonstration. So for me, it is literally a memory demonstration. So it's a deck of cards, no preparation. The cards get shuffled by the audience. 13 cards get counted off. They're fanned out by someone on stage, and they flash those 13 cards to me. They literally sort of for just 1 or 2 seconds, and I try and take a mental snapshot of the cards they've shown me, and I reel off those cards in classic Berglass fashion, because it's all about the reveal. You know, the first few cards I talk about, it's obvious the card on the front was this, that was an easy one, the picture cards stand up, so I saw that one and that one, they're gone, that's fine. And then it's a little bit harder now because we've now got just spot cards that are left. It's this, you know, it becomes tougher as you're going along with a sort of real struggle on the last card, as if I really don't think I'm going to get it type thing. And then suddenly it just occurs to me what it is, and we get the final card, as it were. So having the cards flash to me is the big change. Ross Johnson doesn't do that. The cards are, the guy stands behind him, all the cards are mixed up, they're shuffled, he stands behind him, Russ doesn't turn around and does the reveal. So it's purely mind reading. Having those cards flash to me, and I talk about Harry Lorraine. This is, I talk about being 10 years old. I talk about being given a book that changed my life. It was called How to Develop a Superpower Memory by a New York memory expert called Harry Lorraine. And I talk about Harry Lorraine. I talk about his memory techniques. I explain the idea of association, and I explain the idea of sort of chunking information together. so this is all part of the presentation. So this becomes a 10-minute demonstration again. And it works really well. And what it does do is it creates a follow-up. And although I'm not going to include a ninth effect here, this immediately segues into a poker face routine. So this is where, somebody's going to pick a card from the pack, and, I'm going to ask them things about the card. They're going to keep a poker face, and this is great. It segues into that, but it doesn't always have to segue into that. I have used it and do use it just as the memory demonstration.
So again, you mentioned that this was the lead into your second, the first trick of your second show. I recall going back to talking to Andy Nyman and Darren Brown, and a lot of the time in their shows, they start the second half of their show with something that the audience can just watch and digest and almost lead them back into the performance. And at the very beginning of the show, they tend to put like a game or like an interactive thing that the audience can just partake in from the audience and just enjoy. And it seems to me like this is your approach when you're building or structuring your shows. You tend to start the first half of something with a demonstration that the audience can almost just digest and take in and be in awe of, as opposed to having to actively partake in what's going on. They can just digest it and enjoy it for what it is.
Paul Daniels years ago told me a very interesting thing, and he also published it on the DVD set that Louis D'Amatos put out. And that is, you want to try and create shapes on stage. Now, by that, he means different patterns. So, for example, when Paul Daniels is doing the Chop Cup, he is center stage, but he's talking to two people in the audience, one on either side. So it becomes a triangle. And then the next routine is he gets two people up and they're on either side of him. So it's this rectangle. When he was doing the 6-card repeat or 5-card repeat, he's actually moving along the stage. So he's a line. He would go from one side of the stage to the other side of the stage. And, I thought this was genius. I thought this was actually really good. And if you're ever constructing a mentalism show, it's something worth having in the back of your mind, because a mentalism show can look very samey. It can be someone comes up, they go back. Someone else comes up, they go back. And you want to avoid that. You want different patterns and different shapes. And here's the golden rule. You never repeat a shape in the show. So, if you're getting 4 people up on stage, you don't do another routine where 4 people come up on stage. If you're doing a routine which involves 2 people seated in the audience, you don't do another routine with 2 people seated in the audience. Do you see what I mean? So it's sort of interesting that you brought that up. It wasn't something I was thinking about talking about, but that is something that runs through my shows. It's something that is in there. I'm not saying that I would, construct specifically around different shapes, but I will make sure that all the shapes are different in the show. And I think that's important. Now, there's something else you mentioned as well, which is sort of unique to cruise ship entertainers, and that's this. We come out and we do our first performance, and, it goes well. And what happens is we become celebrities. Everyone on the ship knows who you are. So you become Darren Brown. Everyone knows who you are. You're famous on the ship, which means that when you start your second show, you can start it. You don't have to go out there and with guns blazing and hit them with something really hard straight away. I mean, this is a card memory demonstration we're talking about here. That takes 10 minutes to do. This is actually more slow burn. And summing up is a little bit like that. It's a little bit more slow burn. Lots of choices are made before we get to the climax. But it works in an opening position on a second show because the audience already know what you do. They already love you. They've come back again to see you. And therefore, you can actually just start a show by talking to them and just chatting to them. because you've already earned the time. You've already earned their respect. And this is something Darren talks about in Notes to a Fellow Traveller, that you've earned that respect from them. And it happens as you go through the show. It's what we mentioned about earlier. I don't get people up on stage early in the show because you've got to earn their trust before you can do that. And I think the same sort of thing applies here. So sometimes my second opener is not a traditional opener. It's not that fast and furious, knock them over the head with multiple reactions like Magic Square is. It will be something a little bit more slow burn.
Well, I think it's really interesting as well that because we've had card memory demonstrations on the podcast before, namely Nick Mohammed does a fantastic version. But what I find interesting about yours, and I think it goes back to your philosophy when it comes to reveals, is you mentioned that you're only doing a small chunk of the deck as opposed to the full deck. Which again shows a progression that would be the card memory demonstration of you revealing a 4-letter word as opposed to a piece of personal information. It's
happening earlier on in the show. I want it to be a believable demonstration. If I was ending the show with a card memory demonstration, it would have to be a full deck because it needs that climatic element of that. But this is an opening routine. It's all about not doing too much too soon. If I remember, first of all, I think it'll be a bit slow to do a whole deck of cards as an opening routine. And for me, that just is completely in the wrong place. That would just jar. So yeah, that's, 13 cards, a quarter of the deck. It seems reasonable. It's people can think, well, I could probably memorize 5 or 6 or 7 cards. Good bridge players can, but 13 cards at a glance. And remember, it's a speed thing as well. This is done in 1 or 2 seconds. So, it's not me studying the deck for 30 seconds or something like that. It's just a glance at the cards. Right, I think I've got them, and I try to sort of recall them as quickly as possible before they're sort of fading from my memory, as it were.
Hello guys, I'm here to talk to you about Alakazam Unlimited. This is the best streaming platform in the world, I'm telling you now. With Alakazam Unlimited, you get access to over 150 Magic routines. This is video performances and explanations. We have card magic, coin magic, kids magic, rope magic, mentalism, stage, parlor, impromptu. We've got you covered. All of this for the low price of just £4.99 a month. And you can cancel at any time. Perfect if you've got commitment issues. Yes, I'm talking to you. Guys, you are going to absolutely love it. If you haven't joined the platform already, what the heck are you doing? Alakazam Unlimited is a streaming platform that you need to be a part of. Not only that, there is also exclusive content only available on the platform. Check it out now, alakazam.co.uk. Cheers.
Yeah, well, I think that's another really great choice, and does rather sadly, because I'm really enjoying going through this list, leading us into the tail end of your 8. So we're on number 7. What's in your 7th spot?
Okay, I'm going to put in Sneak Thief. Sneak Thief, it's a staple of many mentalism shows, and it has served me so well over the years because, again, it fits into that category. It's 4 bits of cardboard or 4 bits of paper or 4 business cards or 4 index cards, whatever you want it to be. For me, it generally is A4 or A3 pieces of card because I'm going to do it on stage. And this is 20 minutes. I mean, this is insane. This is 4 bits of cardboard, 4 marker pens, and it's 20 minutes of solid audience engagement and fun and interaction with multiple reveals along the way. Honestly, it can't be beaten. So Larry Becker came up with the routine originally. There are variations. I mean, Max Maven had a routine called Desire. There's a bit of a debate which came first. I think possibly Desire was out there first, but it was certainly Larry Becker that popularized it. Maven's approach is a much more a neater approach. It involves just the performer standing on stage with smaller cards, like, say, index cards, and the reveals happening in the audience, which is quite an interesting way of doing it. But for me, it's getting 4 people up on stage. It's, they're all thinking of something. And this is off the back of one of those audience involvement pieces. I've got everyone in the audience thinking of something or doing something. And the result is that we get, of the people that it's worked for, I choose 4 people, they come up on stage. And I just do it with drawings. To be honest, there's really not that much original that I've added to it, other than the laughs that I get along the way. I mean, other than the sort of presentation, I do it as a lie detector routine, which many people do. And at the end, you've got that solid climax of being able to reveal a nice, clean drawing duplication. It's just one of those routines that can't be beat, really. Like Magic Square, it's a classic, and once you find the presentation that works for you and you find the rhythm of the effect, it's something you will do for life.
Well, I think if we were to do a overall top 8 on this podcast, but purely of mentalism, I do think Sneak Thief would either be second or third at this point.
Yeah, I think it would as well. I mean, it's just, there's part of me that sort of doesn't want to do it because everyone else is doing it. It's a bit like the Magic Square, but I cannot argue with how well it goes down with audiences. And, my job is to entertain and engage audiences. So, I've got to use the routines that work. And so that's what I do. And I think there's a sort of younger generation of mentalists, the people that are getting involved with all the technology that don't go to these sort of routines. And the reality is, I think they are missing out because, 4 bits of cardboard, 4 marker pens, that's insane. And listen, this has been a set many, many times for me. If you think of the challenge word test with the skeptic as an opener, Sneak Thief put in the middle, and then the 2 billet test to close, that is an act with bits of cardboard. We're talking, a business card, 2 envelopes, 2 folded index cards, and let's say 4 index cards for the, for the Sneak Thief. And that is 40 minutes. I mean, that's insane. That's crazy. That I can deliver a 40-minute performance with literally a few bits of paper and some pens, and that is it. And I love that I can do that, because what it does, the props are all uninteresting and unimportant. The props are not props. They're just bits of cardboard and pens. The show is about what you do with them. The show is the people that you come up on stage. The show is the reactions that you get from the people. It's a people show, and that's what mentalism really is. Primarily, your props are people. It's not the latest gizmo. It's not the book that you're using in the book test. It is the people. And the lower grade the props, then the more focus there is on the people and the pseudo method that you're showcasing. And that's what makes it so believable, I think.
Well, the props become completely invisible, I think, in your act completely, because they're just so organic. But a note to Sneak Thief, we have had it mentioned a lot, but, and again, a second ago, you mentioned that part of you feels that you shouldn't perform it because everyone is performing it. But I think what's interesting about your list when I look over it, it's almost like a set of structures. And what you've done with that is you've made each individual structure your own. You've made each piece your own. And Sneak Thief is that. It's not necessarily a trick. It's a structure. It's a series of events that lead to this thing that happens. Hence why we've got, Andy Nyman's mobile phone version. We've had Darren Brown's recent one in his last touring show at the opening of the show, which was just a phenomenal version.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that it's a structure which can allow, with some imagination and some creativity, an endless supply of routines and variation.
I do a cruise line where one of the spots I have to do is in their comedy club, and might be sandwiched between two other comedians, two comedians. I certainly don't put myself in that bracket, and I have to come out and do about 20-minute set, and I do Sneak Thief, but I do a slightly rude version of Sneak Thief, and it's hilarious. Now anyone listening probably thinks that's not me, and it's not, because what I do is I just organically make it happen. I make it happen. And it's great. I verbally can just make it happen without it seeming to happen. It's not, they would have seen my normal show. They know I'm quite serious and prim and proper. And this, I'm shocked that these things have happened on stage. And actually, that adds to the fun and the hilarity of it. But I can inevitably make it happen. And you can imagine what it is. I mean, I'm essentially, let's say people are drawing pictures of cactuses, what a cactus looks like. It's that type of thing. And then we compare how big the cactuses are and so on and so forth. And it's just great. So it's so flexible, and it fits in perfectly within that environment. And it seems as if crazy things are happening to the prim and proper mind reader. So it actually works out really well, and it's quite fun. So yes. I mean, it's so flexible as a routine, so good. It has to be on the list, really.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal trick, and it's a great choice towards the end, and does sadly lead us to number 8. So what did you put in your final spot?
Well, I put in Q&A. Q&A, question and answers. This is the pinnacle of mentalism for a lot of mentalists, the answering of thought of questions in the audience. For me, it started as a sort of thought exercise. What I wanted was a routine where I'm going to stand on stage, just me, behind a microphone. No one comes up on stage, and I'm darting from person to person in the audience, telling them things about themselves, So I'm getting the name Jim. Jim. Stand up if you. I think it's Jim Smith. Where are you? Oh, stand up. Okay, and I'll tell you. And I would tell Jim Smith when he was born, and I would tell him, his car registration number and his phone number, and I would, all of this sort of multiple reveals for each person. And the method I ended up deciding on was a blindfold Q&A. So for me, this is a classic method. And I can't describe the power that this effect has. I mean, basically in the space, it's the last 10 minutes of the show, maybe 15, between 10 and 15. And during that, we reveal personal intimate information about maybe 3 or 4 people in the audience. And during those reveals, we're doing like 4 or 5 pieces of information on each person. So between 12 and 15 reveals happen in the space of that sort of 15 minutes. So, a reveal is happening every couple of minutes. Every there's something being told or revealed often. And it's just this deluge of mind reading. And for me, the Q&A method is, it makes it practical. There's no PS method. It's all done real time. And I think that's important, particularly in the environments that I work in on cruise ships. And it was a showstopper. Sadly, it is something I've retired because of certain issues you get when you become older. So as you get older, you can't, I have to put glasses on to read people's minds. That's that's an issue. But I did this probably for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, and it was just great. Now, recently, I have come up with a way of redoing it, which is not a blindfold method. I would use the same structure that I've already done. And by the way, if you're interested in what that routine is, I published it with Vanishing Ink. It's in a masterclass with them, and it is a masterclass on Q&A. It's all about that routine, really. There are other routines as well, but primarily it's about that. And I'm very pleased that I've now got a sealed envelope version of it that I've only just started doing, and it actually plays very well. And it's still got the multiple reveals. It's still got the sort of multiple. So rather than, what would happen is in the original version, people would write a question on a card. The questions would be collected up by someone in the audience in a basket, and the basket brought up on stage. I've been putting my blindfold on and getting ready to do the routine. The basket comes up and I take out a card, I squeeze it, fold it in my hand, and I would now start doing the reveals, immediately sort of go into it. And that's sort of a classic approach to the blindfold Q&A. But I was very pleased with the structure. And how, again, it builds and how it escalates and how the impossibility ramps up on it is something I'm very pleased of. And it has a wonderful moment at the end when the blindfold comes off, and then after the blindfold has been removed, I do another final reveal with somebody in the middle of the audience, which seems to be real-time mind reading happening there and then. Something spontaneous. We end the show, I go off, I come back on, and I can do an encore. I can immediately actually do someone else and do another spontaneous piece of mind reading. So the structure of it was great. And I have to say, thanks to Michael Webber for that suggestion. Webber had the idea of doing that, and we had a discussion about it, and it really added an excellent moment into my show. And so what I've done with the sealed envelope test has the same structure. So I'm very pleased of it. It's the same thing, multiple reveals, but with that same structure. So, but I won't take too much about it yet because I've only really just started doing it. And it came out of necessity. It came out of, I want to redo Q&A. I want that moment back again. But how do I achieve that moment with the limitations that I now have? So I would end the show, or I would have my final routine would be Q&A, but I'm not sure what method I would be using.
Well, there's so many methods for Q&A now, and I mean they're all roughly based around the same concepts.
Oh, yes, absolutely, that is true. Yeah.
But I think with yours, when I watched your masterclass, I think that, again, it's the structure. And I know Luch touches on this with his Q&A project as well. It is almost like, again, a set of structures that you can...
Well, that frameworks project I talked about a lot with Luch during lockdown about that routine. And a lot of what got added to his emergency Q&A, because that's what it started out with, was from those discussions, really. I mean, the idea of the box really, was something we came up with. The idea of sort of adding in certain elements so that you are able to sort of know in advance what people are thinking of. That sort of element sort of came in as well. For me, I think that's what Q&A has always lacked. And I think that is why a lot of performers don't do it. Because in a lot of the books, it literally is, okay, here's the method. And it is literally a basic, simple method. Well, we won't go into the methods, but it could be something very simple. And the problem is right, but how do we make this entertaining? It's all about the reveals. How are we revealing the information? And I think the big problem with Q&A is that it can be incredibly repetitive. It can, it's just, it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And it's like, it mustn't be that. It has to change in pace. It has to change in density. It has to change in the style of reveal and in the perceived impossibility of the reveal. And once again, we are playing on this audience sense of escalation. I think that's a really important thing to sort of take away maybe from, this podcast is it's something a lot of performers don't talk about, but it's very important because the general public do have a sense of escalation. And if you tap into that, your effects become more impossible as they go along. And Q&A must do that. Q&A must do that in and of its own right. It should be doing that as within the routine itself.
I think one thing that I've taken away from studying Q&A is it comes under the bracket of jazz mentalism. It seems to be, but people think that you have to adhere to one specific method, when the truth is, like you just said, we've taken your entire show and we've referenced all the way through how you're building these reveals. And maybe to begin with, you start with your magic square, and then you have your 4-letter word mentioned, and then you might have a picture, and then you get to the personal information, but that won't be the most personal information. So we have that build up, and Q&A is another basically show in structure, but in one act. So
exactly right. And that's how it should be treated, really. So it needs to start, a little bit slow and dramatic, and as if it's, you're feeling your way along, and then it elevates in pace as it goes through. It becomes more animated and more exciting as we're going along, and that can be done just with your voice. That can be something you can get that sense of escalation in the pace at which you're speaking, as you get more excited that you're connecting with the people, as we're going along. But of course, just holding back information, just revealing something, what movie they're thinking of, what's their favorite movie, something like that. Again, it's personal information, but it's not that personal. So you maybe hold back the really personal information. And by the way I've done the framing for this is, it's just them writing a question. It starts as classic Q&A. I want you to write down a question that you would love to know the answer to. Now, but I'm able to give them extra information. I'm able to tell them extra information as well. The audience perception is that they've just written down a question, but I'm able to delve in. The question is the starting point. And once I've connected with them on the question, that enables me to connect with them and reveal more things about them. It seems organic. It seems like it's happening spontaneously. It also seems that nothing's written down. So there is this sense going on as well. So there is an element of, would we say, DR? Does that sort of make sense to people? Sort of going on within the routine.
Yep, I get that entirely. I'm sure everyone is on the same page. But what an amazing list. So we started with the Magic Square, Audience Chair Test, Challenge Mind Reading, Psychology, 2 Billet Tests, Card Memory Demonstration, Sneak Thief, and ending on a Blindfold Q&A. What an incredible list of tricks that you've selected there.
And that's pretty much my set. That's my material. As I said, there's a little bit of overlap with show 2 there. It's a bit of a mishmash of show 1 and show 2 together. But essentially, that's all the material there.
Well, it's a great, great list, and does lead us on to our last items. Now, obviously, you've had 8 selections of tricks, but you only get 1 each of the last 3 items. So you are one of the first people to get this. You have a banishment. So what did you banish onto your island?
Okay, my banishment. I thought long and hard about this because it's actually quite tricky. but I think I will banish inconsistency within a performance, because I do see it sometimes. When you're presenting a certain theme or a certain idea, you have to stick to that. You can't be inconsistent. I'll give you a good example, and I think this will sort of, make it clear in everyone's minds. For example, I have seen performers come out with an index card, and a prediction is written with a pencil on the index card, and somebody is chosen in the audience who stands up and they count the change that they've got in their pocket. And amazingly, when the index card is read out by another spectator, the performer has predicted the change that was in the pocket. Brilliant effect, classic effect, great opener, fantastic. And of course, uses a specific method, in this case, an NW. All right, we all know what we're talking about. The problem is, I've then seen that performer pick up a massive A2 pad with a massive Sharpie marker pen and go into another reveal. And it's like, well, why didn't you write the change on the pocket? Why you should have done that on the big pad of paper. All right. And I learned this the hard way, because it was probably 20 years ago. I was doing a show with a very famous comedian called Barry Williams, whose nephew is Marc Williams, who's become a magician. And Barry Williams loved magic. Barry was a great comic, always had loads of gigs. And part of what he used to do would be to sell in doing close-up magic. And he was one of the first performers that actually got me starting to do the stage work. So he was one that would get me to do a little 10 minutes after we'd done the close-up, a little 10 minutes before he came and did his comedy, for example. And I did an add-a-number routine. And Barry didn't really know how it worked. He's not a magician. He loves magic, but he didn't know how it worked. And his note to me at the end was simply, do you know what? They shouldn't write it down on a little pad of paper. What you need to do is have a big pad of paper and just get them to call out the numbers, write them down, and then add it up and show everyone. And do you know what? He's 100% right. And do you know what what came out of that thought was summing up. Summing up is exactly that. It was Barry Williams that basically, with that one comment, because I'm doing add a number, they have to write it on a little pad of paper. And Barry said, well, no, that's wrong. Theatrically, it's wrong. They should just call out the numbers. You should write them down on a big flip chart. Everyone sees it. You can add up the numbers and then reveal your prediction. And that is absolutely true. And it's it's the theatrics of things. And sometimes the method dictates what we have to do. And that's where the inconsistency comes from. So to eliminate the inconsistency, you either have to remove the trick or you have to change the method, like I did with summing up. So summing up is essentially the same effect as add a number, but done with everything on view. So what I would like to banish is inconsistency. Think about your shows. Think about your acts. Have you got inconsistency? Have you got things in there that jar with your audience? Because the problem is, you might think they're not important, but the problem is that they will register with an audience because they jar. Inconsistencies jar. And if you've got that moment where something's jarring with your audience, that they've been jumped out of your show. They're no longer flowing along the river of your show. They're no longer in the boat. They've jumped out the boat and are in the water for a brief period of time. They're awake, and something has jarred with them. They may not even know what it is, but something feels off. So inconsistencies need to be eliminated. So they're banished from all acts from now onwards.
Well, we have banished that onto your island. But what I think is really interesting about what you said there is it almost helps your creative side. It almost gets you questioning things. Because it's almost like an open restriction, if that's a thing. So you're restricting yourself by saying, well, I can't use that method. But then really you're opening up creativity, and it's going to be a way that you can make things a bit more original and a bit more you.
Absolutely. I mean, in the close-up world, a simple example would be, the magician picks up a deck of cards, does a routine with it, puts that in his pocket and takes out another deck of cards and does another routine. That's an inconsistency. You need to think of a way that you can do both routines together, if that's what you want to do. And we might be, there might be a special pack of cards and another special pack of cards that achieves the result. Fine, but maybe why don't you do something in between that, and the deck of cards casually goes away, and so it's out of action. It's that type of thing. Maybe you're right, it's problem solving, it's making things flow, and inconsistencies get in the way of that. So I think it's important to try and evaluate when there is an inconsistency.
Well, that leads us onto your book. So you mentioned at the very head of the podcast that you read a lot and that you're very well read, so I'm guessing to get it down to one book must have been very difficult.
Well, it wasn't. I have a lot of favourite magic books. I do love to read, and one of the classics that almost made it to the list was Anna Mann's classic Practical Mental Effects. Although, you see, I wouldn't have Practical Mental Effects. I would have to have all of Jinx, because there's so many things that got missed out of Practical Mental Effects that are in the Jinx. But I can't take those. No. It was actually quite simple. It distills down to David Berglass. David Berglass published 2 massive coffee table books. The Mind, Myth and Magic of David Berglass was one of them. We've already talked about it because that's where the escalation routine is. And the rest of his act, everything is in there. I mean, his thoughts and his ideas, and it's a masterclass in learning how to become a legend, basically, because that's what Berglass was all about. But I've actually chosen his second book. I've chosen the Berglass Effects to come with me to the island, because I've already got with me a pack of cards, because that's the pack of cards that I'm using for the 13-card memory demonstration. And with that one deck of cards, what the Berglass Effects book is all of David's card work. And the reality is, it took him a lifetime to create this work. So I know that if I take that book, it'll take me a lifetime to study it and create the effects that David was creating as well. And I think that's why I want to take it, because I don't know how long I'm going to be on this island, and I know that it'll occupy me for ages. So the Berglass Effects.
I think that's a great choice. And I think if we were playing Marc Paul Bingo, we may have put that in. And I know that we have Affected by Berglass, which was your effect, which was your any card at any number. So you can see you've really taken some of his ideas and really made them your own, and really made them Marc Paulified, if that's a term I can use.
That's true. I think that is very true. He was certainly my hero, and a massive inspiration and a friend. I was very fortunate that when I lived in North London, I was only sort of 5-10 minute car drive from where he lives, so I visited with him often, and I was very pleased to see him only a few weeks before he passed away. So I was very pleased to have sort of known at the time that probably that was the last time I was going to see him. So it was good to see him. And I think what Berglass's legacy is this. The man was all about mystery, and that was so important. And sometimes nowadays in magic, it's sort of being a bit sidelined, with all the stuff we see on TikTok and all the exposure and so on. It's, some of the mystery is being eroded, and it's a real shame, because Berglass was a legend, was unique. in the sense that, there was no one will ever be like him again. And when we come to the material, I mean, the Berglass effects, yes, I know the sort of parameters, the card magic and so on, but it really is studying these things that he's created over a lifetime. And that's why you'll never get to that level, because he's just been doing it so long. And he once told me that for him, a deck of cards was the ultimate effect, that he could walk out on stage with a pack of cards in a box. He would throw it on the table and know that he had 20 minutes, half an hour of mind-blowing material. And what was even better about it, he didn't know where it would start and he didn't know where it would end. It's like the ultimate improv. And the ultimate freedom. Can you imagine? I mean, that's just, to me, I have the hugest respect for comedians. They're the ultimate entertainer. They stand up with nothing except their words. Well, for me, that, Berglass and his deck of cards, that's the closest. He's just standing there with a deck of cards and it's all him. It's his knowledge and his presentation and his ideas and his thoughts and just flowing and going with it, And in his prime, there was nothing better, honestly, just fantastic seeing some of those effects. And I was very privileged to sort of see the card routines many, many, many times. And of course, he could do it anywhere. It could be in a cabaret situation on a stage. He could do it in his dining room, anywhere, just anywhere with a deck of cards. He could deliver some mind-blowing performance material.
Well, I think that's a great selection for your book and leads us nicely onto your non-magic item. So what did you put in your non-magic spot?
Well, I've got two. And the reason I've got two is the first item I'm going to tell you, you might think it's a magic item. So we have to be a bit careful here. What I'm actually going to go with, the item I have to take with me, is a Sharpie Magnum. So, to me, that is actually the ultimate mentalist tool, because this, we're all familiar with Sharpies, but a Sharpie Magnum, this is the best marker pen I've ever found. The nib is about 12 millimeters wide. You can do, there's a slightly, depending on how you do it, you can have a 6 millimeter line, you can have a 12 millimeter line. This ties into something that Ali Bongo told me years and years ago, all right? It's not about size. It is about width, all right? And that is so true, because the size of the line that you draw on your pad has to be thick. It's no good having a regular Sharpie and drawing it big, 12 inches tall. The audience can't see it. The line has to be thick. So it has to be a Sharpie Magnum. Will you allow me to have that, or do you think it's a bit of a mentalist thing?
No, I think I'll let you have that. We've had pens before, but I think that the point that you make there of the size of the line, I was going to say, do you get people to draw cactuses with those pens as well? But I didn't want to go there. But yeah, I think that those are the little things that sometimes when we first start gigging and start performing that mean the difference between a successful show and a not. And that seems really silly, but sometimes when you perform for an audience, you feel like maybe something's not gelled, and you think that maybe it's you, maybe it's something that you've done, but sometimes it really is as simple as they cannot read what you're writing. They cannot see what you're drawing.
If they can't see the reveal, then you're dead in the water. It really is. And it's interesting because there are some really clever devices that have come onto the market recently that are phenomenal. I mean, unbelievable, incredible technology. And it's like an A4 board. And it's like, really? Okay, no good to me. Bongo for me, I mean, he was the ultimate with all of this sort of knowledge. And again, sadly, this has all been lost. I mean, another example of Bongo's incredible thinking was flutterfetti. So this is his formula for confetti. I mean, you think confetti, it's bits of paper that you're going to throw up in the air. Well, no, you see, Ali came up with the formula that is 3 by 1. You cut a piece of paper, your tissue paper is 3 by 1. Let's say it's 1 centimeter by 3 centimeters. It's a long rectangle. The reason being is because it flutters in the air. It stays in the air forever. Whereas if you've got 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter pieces of tissue paper, they just fall to the ground. So flutterfetti was Bongo's idea, and now it's a standard. It is a standard amongst visual performers and so on. But it's that sort of knowledge that I think is so important. And just in case the listeners wanted to know what my backup item was, non-magical item, I'm a great Stephen King fan. I love Stephen King. I read his books. I think I've read everything. And I would take with me The Stand, because it's probably his best work. It's also 1,400 pages long, so that would keep me occupied as well. So that was going to be my backup. And it's also great for doing a book test with.
And if only you had a great book test that could be done anywhere, anytime
with any book.
So that's a great callback. Well, I think that's a great list. We've gone from the Magic Square audience chair test, challenge mind reading, Escalation, a 2 Billet test, card memory demonstration, sneak thief, blindfold Q&A. Your banishment is consistency in performance. Your book is the Berglass effects, and your item is the Magnum Sharpie with a side of The Stand by Stephen King. What a great list.
And we're almost at 2 hours. I'm heading towards Darren territory, but didn't quite make it.
But yeah, for someone who's been, so instrumental in, mentalism and developing these ideas, and someone who's done the cruise ships, who's done the close-up, who's, been around the block, so to speak, I think it's great that we've got this to listen back to and to reference. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for asking me to do it. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for all the questions that got me thinking as well. So bravo, well done.
Well, if people want to find out more about you, about the material that you've put out, about shows, all of that good stuff, where can they go to?
Well, if you go to my website, which is marcpaul.com. That's my sort of normal commercial website, for bookings and so on. But there is a hidden page there. So if you can find the hidden page, you'll have to answer a couple of mentalism related questions to access it. But the hidden page will tell you where you can get all of my products. Basically, the hidden page is then a link to all of everything that I've published, which is sort of all over the place. As I say, you can go to Vanishing Ink, and there's the masterclass. You can go to Penguin Magic. You can, of course, go to Alakazam. Alakazam have my academy, which is so it's almost 9 hours of material. It's close-up mentalism. It's close-up performance material. It's mind reading, stand-up, cabaret stuff. It's a whole section on trade shows and performing at trade shows and the type of material you use at trade shows. So there's projects all over the place, and most recently I did a project with the 1914, which is an anywhere act, along the lines of what we've been talking about, being able to do an act anywhere. And it's actually an act with just index cards. So, that there's some food for thought in there as well. But if you go to my website and you find the hidden page, all of those things are listed and there are links to them. So you can go from one page to everything else.
And as someone who has digested all of that material several times over, I cannot recommend all of it enough. So really do go check them out. They are all phenomenal pieces of work. It will have you thinking for days, years on your own island at this rate. So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot then, Jamie. I'm going to put you on the spot. What of it what of all that material do you actually use? Do you use any of it? Is there anything you use in your shows?
Yes. So summing up, I'm afraid to say, after you mentioned that everyone does it, I have done it since your first Penguin lecture. When I learnt about that, and I have done the escalation. I have also done, but I do a slight variation with photos which end up spelling out another decision that someone has made as well.
Cool, excellent, great. That sounds great. You've made that your own as well. Well done.
Yeah, well,
good.
I think it's such that they're all such great routines, but I think what you allow magicians to do is to really take your ideas and thoughts and to make them their own.
I think, the one thing I've always tried to do is the stuff I publish is the stuff I do. This is not, I'm not creating for the sake of creating. I'm creating for myself, for different environments, or for different projects. And then at some point somebody asks me to do a project, and I will then release the material or whatever. So I'm not a sort of huge fan of releasing material just for the sake of releasing the material. I do gravitate towards performers, people who are releasing material that have performed it, that are, releasing their tried and tested material. I'm all ears. I'm interested in what they have to say and their ideas and what they're sort of coming up with as well. So,
well, hopefully soon, maybe we'll have the audience chair test.
I know you've been asking me, haven't you? Yeah,
which would be great.
It is in the back of my mind. Don't worry, it will happen at some point. It's when I'm ready with the material, as it were.
Well, that gives us all something to look forward to, me included. But thank you again, Mark, and thank you for your time and your generosity with all of the information and advice that you've given here.
My pleasure, Jamie, and thank you again for asking me. It's been a pleasure to do.
And thank you all for listening. Of course, we're going to be back next week with another episode. Like I said, please do go check out all of Mark's material. It really is phenomenal. And of course, we do have Stranded with a Stranger, so if you want to send in your list of 8 tricks, 1 banishment, 1 book and 1 non-magic item, and send it to sales@alakazam.co.uk with the subject line My Desert Island List, please include a little bio and of course the reasons that you chose the tricks, and we'll get one of those recorded for you. So thank you very much. This has been a phenomenal episode. I'm sure you guys have enjoyed it just as much as I have. And that leads me to say we'll see you next week for another episode of Desert Island Tricks. Goodbye.
Hi, Peter Nardi here, and I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. I just wanted to let you know that Alakazam have their own app. You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. By downloading the app, it will make your shopping experience even slicker at Alakazam. You'll also get exclusive in-app offers and in-app live streams. So go download it now, and we'll see you on the next podcast.